say. With the sunlight out still somewhat, I still think it's afternoon, hopefully, but it is a pleasure to see all of you tonight. My name is Steve Salerno. I'm your superintendent of schools, and tonight is an evening long in the making as a result of some really outstanding work of a number of our employees. Before we dig right in, I'd like to take a moment just to acknowledge a couple of folks who are present in the audience tonight. Specifically, I'm referring to members of our Board of Education. If you would be so kind as to stand up and we can say hello and thank you and give a round of applause. So we're grateful to all four of you for finding time yet again, another night this week to be out, but we're grateful to have your leadership and your presence. No doubt you've heard about this meeting through a number of social media posts, and the dynamic duo of Lundquist and Christensen and their social media posts. Have you seen the videos? You have to laugh a little bit. So I know in this evening's program, we are definitely going to be engaged, and we know the success of this program will really be as a result of your involvement and the extent to which you have to share your insights. If you don't mind, I'd just like to point a couple of things out to you at your table. The first of which, just a second, is the Board of Education's new strategic plan. You may see that in a trifold here at your tables. That coupled with a insert, and that insert is called Prepared for Our Future. And in essence, this really is in our mind a compact we have with our community about the knowledge, the skills, the dispositions that our students will have when they complete their studies here in the 12th grade. This was put together as an addendum to our strategic plan, and quite frankly, our board, our community is quite proud of it. Thank you for your input if you were a part of that development. So without further ado, I am grateful to these two gentlemen for their leadership shown, as well as a number of staff members who I also see who are part of our committee that's been studying this topic. And I would be remiss if I didn't extend a note of gratitude to my friend and colleague in the back, Sarah Straka, who's our Director of Instruction. Thank you, Sarah, for your extraordinary leadership in this effort. So could you please welcome Paul and Cody?
Thanks, everyone. First of all, thanks for coming out. I'm Paul Christensen. I'm the principal at the middle school, and Cody and I have spent quite a bit of time hopefully putting together some information for you that will be helpful and educational, and also give you maybe answers to some questions that you have. But admittedly, you're welcome to ask questions as we go, but there possibly could be things that either we haven't considered or haven't thought about yet, or just don't have completely finalized with this. So on the tables throughout, there are little note cards. You are welcome to jot a note on these. If you want to put your name, that would be awesome, with your contact information, just in case we need to follow up with you. But feel free to jot any questions that you have down there. We will collect those at the end and make sure that we get back to you, or put those in any future communications that we have. So please use that as a tool if at all possible. To that point, we have a task force that actually has been doing this work for quite a while. And the task force is made up of teachers and administrators from the elementary level all the way up through the high school. And we've been working for a number of years. We'll actually be meeting again tomorrow after school. So again, that's a nice opportunity for us to look at those questions that you have and talk about those as a team. What this group has done over the last couple of years, first of all, has just done a lot of education and reading ourselves. And from that, we've collected some baseline data from teachers around the district as far as what they know about grading and assessment, maybe what questions they have. And then we've broken into some subcommittees which have tackled everything from looking at proficiency levels, which we will get into more detail about later, to thinking about how best to communicate this to staff, to students, and to families. So we spent a lot of time around that, just thinking about our purpose, developing some goals, and really digging into the work that's taken us years to get to this point. And also we've got some timelines as we move forward. So Cody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you can see our team here, and one of the things that this team did, again, like Paul said, we've been together for a while. Actually, even before COVID was when this work really started to kick off. So imagine 4 or 5 years this has been work in the making with different teachers and different staff. But when we came together, we really wanted to understand what's our purpose, what's our why? Why do we do what we do? What is the purpose of grading, and how can we communicate that out? So we got together, and as you can see here, this is our vision, our why. And I'll read it out to you. It says, educators within the Mount Horeb Area School District are committed to grading practices that support the learning process, encourage student success, and accurately reflect student progress towards mastery of identified standards. The purpose of a grading system at the Mount Horeb Area School District is to clearly, accurately, consistently, and fairly communicate. And I really want to highlight that word communicate because we're going to talk a lot about that. The learning progress and achievement. Students need to be at the heart of their learning, and therefore the practices and systems are put in place that make students aware and active partners in their learning in order to meet determined standards for proficiency and achievement. There's a lot of words in there, proficiency and achievement, and there's a lot of kind of, let's say, education lingo, and we're going to get into kind of what some of these things mean. But this statement, right, really drives the work of what we feel like we're doing, what we need to be doing as educators. And again, I really want to highlight that component about communicating and being clear, because I'm actually talking a lot about clarity and being clear about what grades look like and then what teachers and staff are doing. One of the work, right? Learning and exploring our current grading practices. So what we were doing is, we first started like, what are we currently doing? We got together, we brought elementary report cards in, we had middle school report cards in, high school transcripts, we brought all this stuff to the table, and we had grade reports, we had teachers K-12, and we were talking like, what are we currently doing? And then we take those things, and we look at what our why was, and after looking at our why and what we're currently doing, what are we missing? What is something that maybe we're not meeting that vision? We're not quite living that vision yet. How can we better communicate? How can we be clear, right? And so by doing that, we also started to look at other school districts across the state, especially the area. What are districts doing around us? We had communications with superintendents, directors of instruction of other districts. We visit other districts, and a lot of conversations about what they're doing around this work. And so we had our why, and then we started to explore as a group about what other districts are doing, what are we doing, and how can we kind of come to a consensus about really meeting that vision and meeting that why with what we're doing. We believe that we want to support the learning process. We want to encourage student success. And then again, want to accurately reflect student progress towards mastery of identified standards. And then you're going to see this again, clearly, accurately, consistently, fairly communicate student learning progress and achievement. And I think that we had a lot of conversations at staff meetings. I think at the high school we put this up and said, okay, which words stick out to you? What do you connect with as educators and teachers? And we talked about, do our grades, are they clear? Are they accurate? Are they consistent? Are they fair? And if they're not, what can we do? What are the things that we can do to better our practices?
Okay, quickly, in front of you, you have hopefully a writing utensil and a piece of white paper. You can just take that out. That would be fantastic. You're not going to have to share this with anyone. You aren't going to have to show anyone else. But we have a very brief activity for you. So, your learning intention, or what it is that we're asking you to do, is to draw a butterfly. Okay? So go ahead and, on your piece of paper, draw a butterfly. Okay, couple seconds. All right, now we're going to grade it. Okay, so if your butterfly has wings, give yourself 3 points. If it has antennae, give yourself 5 points. If your butterfly has elongated wings, give yourself another 5 points. If your butterfly doesn't have a small bud at the end of each antenna, take off 6 points. If your butterfly does not have circles or dots on the outside of the wings, take off another 5 points. If your butterfly does not have wings darkly shaded around the edges, take off 8 points. If your butterfly abdomen is not shaded, take off another 3. So, I'm gonna guess everybody's looks exactly like one of these. Right? So this is what we wanted it to look like when we started. But what we didn't do is give you a whole lot of information about how you would know that that's what it should look like, other than we just said, go ahead and draw a butterfly. So, Cody.
Yeah. As you were grading yourself and going through maybe a little self-assessment, and you're laughing, right, giggling like, oh, 8 points off here, 6 points off here. Okay, this is not going to go so well for me. Think about that feeling that you have of maybe not really having clear expectations of what you were drawing, and you're up there and you're drawing, and I know that I was really, we did this with staff, and I was quite frustrated. I'm a terrible artist, and even then I'm like, points off, points off. I didn't know what the exact butterfly should look like. So think about what that feeling was being graded or grading yourself. If there was a lesson, what could you be given that would maybe helped beforehand? What could you have been handed? What could you have been told? Yes, there might have been maybe a lesson that you heard verbally, but I will tell you not all of our learners are verbal. They need to see something. So what could you have been given? What could you have had ahead of time that maybe not gave you the answers, but could really have helped you better understand those instructions? Or what could have been done differently in the lesson? You're gonna see a word here, clarity. You're probably gonna get sick of me saying this word a lot tonight. But what clarity in your learning was surfaced, right? Like what came out? And then you think this happens in our classrooms today? Do you think students sit down, they're given an assignment, they're given a test, they're given a project. All right, you gotta write a 5-page paper. It's on this topic. It's due in 2 weeks. Well, so we can have any questions. Does it happen now? Could that happen now? Right? And what are our current practices? Just things to reflect on, because we're actually come back to some of these questions. And I told you to get sick of me talking about clarity. One thing in the district, you might have heard, and I would hope, we've been doing a lot of work around teacher clarity, which actually comes out of a researcher, John Hattie's work. He did some meta-analysis, which is taking thousands of pieces of research and kind of really getting down to what best supports student growth, what makes student learning most successful. And as a district teacher, clarity was one of those things that we felt was achievable. It's right there, it's low-hanging fruit. We can include it in all different content areas. And what teacher clarity is I'll go ask a student, what are you learning? Why are you learning it? And how are you to know that you have learned it? So this is really what the essence of clarity is. And within clarity, you'll see teachers will have things called success criteria, learning objectives and success criteria, learning intentions. This is what we're learning today, and this is what success will look like. You'll know you've learned it, what it looks like, and we'll ask kids questions. How do you know you're successful? What is it going to look like? It's about being clear, really clear up front about what the lesson's going to look like, what the unit's going to look like, and what success looks like. So we want to be intentional, we want to be clear, we want to be transparent for students about what they're going to be learning about. Almost like a foreshadow. Think of foreshadowing out what you have coming up. So this is a quote from a research that says the simple idea of standards-based learning is to ensure transparency in all elements of teaching and learning process. That word transparency, clear, just being transparent. This is all that's there. You'll see the term standards-based learning. In the context that we talk about what we've been doing is that how do we show that information? That's through evidence-based grading. So students give us evidence, they give us what they know, they've learned, and we grade it based on a set of standards. But really, again, clarity and transparency with whether it's instruction, what they're doing, but also what students can do to get better. So again, think clarity and transparency. So let's talk about what evidence-based grading is, EBG. We'll try to keep saying evidence-based grading and not all the acronyms that come with it. It's grading a way to measure individual students' proficiency, and we'll get into that definition in a bit, on a set of skills or content based on evidence shown. So what does proficiency look like? How do they know what they've done? And the evidence collected by the teacher for each student is directly related to the grade level content standards. And here at the Mount Horeb, we have essential learning outcomes, ELOs. You can find them on our district website if you kind of want to see what those look like at our for each grade level and content area. You can have access to those. You can see right there. But we bolded, evidence-based grading helps communicate a student's learning, strengths, and areas of growth. And we'll show you what that kind of looks like when we give feedback. Again, clarity. Giving feedback is also a big theme when it comes to evidence-based grading. So this is where we're going to kind of now get into what evidence-based grading is as it relates to clarity. And we're going to do a little comparison here. You've got traditional grading on the left, which is, I would say, kind of argue what we do now. Elementary is, I would say, been doing some evidence-based grading. You'll see the 3-2-1. You have it looks a little bit different at the elementary level. At the middle school and high school, some middle school have been kind of doing a little bit of this. But the high school, you're seeing percentages, and you're seeing some real things I think I was used to when I was in school, right? Percentages and the ABCDF. It's based on the percentage system. It leans on assessments like quizzes, homework, and essays. Science often includes extra credit. It will include zeros, group scores. If you say, we've all been in the group where we're the one carrying the group, we're like, oh, okay, next week we do something, but we all are graded, and next student gets the grade we get. So include grading, group work, and then sometimes an overall grade can be an average. And I'll give you an example. If you take, let's say you get a 0 on a piece of homework, it will take you 17 or 18, 90% just to get your average up to an 85. So let's say you had a tough day. You came in, maybe you missed something, you get a 0. It is going to take you a lot of 90% to get up to even that what we would call a mid-B right now. And is that really truly reflective of what the student knows? They're getting all these 90s. And so that imbalance is something that we notice with traditional. Evidence-based grading is focused on the learning goals, and we'll be giving you some examples in a bit here. Measures achievement only, not extra credit you're not going to get. Oh, I went to this one concert and I wrote some notes. You want to show truly learning what they know about the standards, not something that they've done. And only items meant to measure achievement are recorded. So practice is one of those things that we talk about. Like, we want the grade reflect what the student knows, not what they practice or what they were able to practice, but what they can truly show at the end. It's based on evidence, and then the learning can be matched to traditional grades. So I want to remind you, at the high school level, some people are going to ask, okay, we're going to see some things here. What's going to happen to our grading? What's going to happen to the high school transcript? You're still going to have an ABCDF on the high school transcript. So just keep that in your mind about like what's grading going to look like at the high school level. You're still going to see a transition into what we would call kind of traditional for a variety of reasons. And I've talked to a few university admissions offices about what they see. And we will be keeping that ABCDF there because I know that could be a lot of questions about that. And we have scholarships. We have a lot of things that impact our students that we need to make sure we keep those traditional end grades, especially in the high school transcript there.
So, a couple of key terms have jumped out. Just as Cody's been talking, he's talked a lot about clarity. I think you'll hear the word learning a lot in terms of that's really the focus of what we're communicating back. So we're being clear, we're communicating, and we're focusing on learning. There are some real benefits to evidence-based grading. When we think about having students be more focused on what it is that I'm learning, what is important in this class, rather than I'm chasing some points or I need to get to an 80%, those types of things. It's really about what am I supposed to learn, why am I learning it, and how can I show that I'm proficient in it. That's definitely one of the benefits. When I think about a growth mindset, I think about students can see their progress along the way. So if they're asked to write a paragraph that has statistics and facts that tie to their thesis statement, maybe they're able to come up with some statistics and some facts, but they aren't quite sure how to have them tie back to their statement. Okay, so they can see that progression as they move through their learning a little bit. When we think a little bit about instruction, evidence-based grading really allows us to take little pieces of evidence and formative assessments and use that to adjust our instruction more in the moment. And lots of teachers are able to do that already, where they're collecting formative information. But this really allows them to do that in a much more organic way, if you will, because we're taking sort of that percentage and that points thing out of it. Cody talked a little bit about feedback, and what I think about this one mostly is that as a teacher, my feedback is no longer you need to complete this task or you need to get X number of more points to get to an 80%. It's more about this is where you are in your learning and we're trying to get you here. So these are the things that you need to do in order to get there, rather than if you come in and get a few extra points on this assessment, okay, then you get to move up to a B. The other thing that I think we learned a lot about as we read and researched and had conversations with each other as well as other districts is there's a lot of misconceptions out there, or there's a number of myths about evidence-based grading. So one of those has to do with it's easier for students. And rather than chasing points, students are chasing their learning a little bit. And they can still fail. They can still not be proficient in something and still come out with a very poor grade in some place. But the thing that I think just jumps out at me a little bit is that they can find little successes. And I was thinking about, okay, if I had an assessment and it was covering 4 major standards or pieces of information that were necessary, currently, if I was on a percentage scale, I could say, all right, well, if I get 3 out of the 4 right, I have a 75%, that's a C, that's pretty good, right? Evidence-based grading doesn't really let you off the hook, because what it says is you're doing really well in these 3 things, you have not given me any information in this area, we need to focus on that. So it's just a little bit different way to look at that, but it definitely doesn't necessarily mean it's any easier. Standards-based takes more work by the teachers. I think it's different work, and it definitely takes some learning. But not everything is graded all the time. We talked about you're getting little pieces of evidence, and you're using that to help drive your instruction and give feedback to students. Those little formative pieces of information allow you to think about all of the conversations you've had with students about their learning. Doesn't necessarily mean it's more work, it's just maybe a little bit different way to look at it. There's only one way to implement it. That's inaccurate. Schools have been doing this for a long time. Schools in this area have been, schools around the nation have been doing this for 10, 12, 15 years. This is not a new thing. The goal of evidence-based learning is to communicate better with students and families about the learning that is taking place. Beyond that, it's really about what is best locally for you. So there are lots and lots of different models out there. They'll no longer be accountable. And if we think about accountable meaning consequences, which I don't, then I suppose you could say, sure, that's the case. But students, again, like I said before, with the 75% or the 3 out of the 4, this doesn't let them off the hook on that. This doesn't allow them to just, I never learned that one piece, but I still get a pretty good grade because I got 3 out of 4. So it really does not. And it also takes the behavior piece out of it, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, because turning things in on time or participating in a class, those are important things, but they don't necessarily show us anything about how students are learning. And they'll be unprepared for the real world. I think we've seen, first of all, that more and more businesses or companies that are really progressive and successful give a lot of feedback to their employees, and they do that in a way to be supportive and encouraging, not in a way that's punitive. And often that feedback or those conversations are very specific to a certain person. They are often skill strength-based, if you will. And the other thing I would say is there's a lot of things out there that, in the real world, in a job, you still have a specific standard or level of standard that you have to complete in order for you to show that, yep, I'm very proficient at that. That can be everything from taking your pilot's license to learning how to fix a carburetor on a car to repairing something in a house. You either can do it proficiently or you can't. And if you can't, you have to learn how to do that. And the other thing that I think is a little interesting about this, if you think about traditional grading, There's a lot of averaging that goes on. So it takes all of these things early on where maybe you weren't really good at it, and by the end you're great at it, but it just averages those out. If you think about things in the real world, once you have become proficient on something and you're really good at it, none of that stuff matters anymore. Because now I'm really good at this, and I'm competent in doing this standard, this skill, whatever that happens to be, rather than I averaged out, I used the carburetor example, I averaged out all of the carburetors that I messed up and I'm finally really good at it, right? Like those don't count anymore. So I just think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about evidence-based grading and what it is. Okay, take a look at your butterfly again once. Cody.
So yeah, so think about your butterfly again, because I want to go back to the butterfly, and even thinking of the reflection questions about one of the things I asked, what would you have needed? What's something that would have helped you as you look at your butterfly, you're like, it's a really pretty butterfly, but I had negative 4 points, right? Like you have this mindset, like you really are proud of your butterfly, but it didn't quite get you didn't get you the grade you wanted. What could you have had that might have helped you be more successful? And I want you to think of it, that was really the question there that I wanted you to think about, because one of the things that we can, in evidence-based grading that we provide, or that you can provide, this is one example, is a single point rubric, proficient. If you'd have had, comprised of 3 major parts, abdomen, wings, antenna, has enlarged wings, darkly shaded around the edges with circles, dots on the outside, has 2 antennae with a small bud drawn in each. If we'd have given this to you at the beginning of a unit and said, hey, just so you know, this is what you're going to be assessed on, this is what proficients look like. And then we go through, we work on shading, we work on drawing, work on scales, we kind of go through all the different pieces of drawing a butterfly. And at the end, and even throughout, we're like, you'd be putting little notes over here saying, awesome, this is great. You know what? I think you got a little work to do yet on the shading. Let's continue to work on shading. Don't worry about that top one. Your average piece, you're good. Let's work on shading. If that's the feedback you're given in a really clear, concise way, I'm going to bet that your butterfly at the end is probably going to be a better butterfly than maybe you had today. Maybe yours is beautiful today, and I don't mean to insult it. But I think thinking about what we can give students at the beginning of a lesson, going back to clarity. We talk about clarity in teaching. How can we really clear what our expectations are for students? There are so many things, I think, in the real world where we know what that end goal is. We know what it looks like. We know how to get there. We know what, but in school, it shouldn't be a mystery. School and things should be a mystery. There's some mystery involved in learning, and I trust our teachers to like build that in and make it exciting and engaging. But in the end, the kids should know kind of what that success looks like. I know I certainly benefit from seeing exemplars and seeing examples and what that looks like. So I think we all benefit from that. And by having, and this is again, a single point rubric, it's a way to have information shared ahead of time and even through the feedback process that allows a student to be successful. And so when you think of evidence-based grading, here are the standards. When we talk standards, essential learning outcomes, you got 3 of them right there. How can we give that feedback? And this is one of many great tools to give feedback. And going back to Paul's point before, there's so many different ways to do this. This is a way. There are a variety of different ways to do it.
You've heard the word proficiency a lot tonight as well. And the team has really worked to figure out how can we best communicate students' learning and progress along the way. And we've come up with these as far as the proficiency levels. And the goal is proficient. If there is a skill or a standard that we are working towards, students, the goal is to get to proficient. There may be times or opportunities where students are already proficient, and we have to think about how do we extend their learning beyond the grade level standard, beyond the 7th grade math standard. So there may be opportunities where we have to push them a little bit because we already know that they're there. We have students that are in that case right now, right? But there's also going to be times where, you know what, you're not quite there yet, you're approaching it. So these are the levels, and these are some just ways to define those levels. So it might be that on one particular skill, I sort of have it, but it's inconsistent, right? Or I can't really apply that skill yet. Okay, well, I'm approaching proficiency. But if I can essentially demonstrate a clear understanding of it on a very regular basis with little to no help, where I'm doing that on my own now, I am now proficient at whatever that skill is for any given course. And I'm guessing you can think about things either in your job or at your house, where you could think like, yeah, I'm proficient at this, or I'm just beginning at this. No different than in a classroom, right? So those are some descriptors there for those levels. I took a couple examples. These are right from Infinite Campus. These are middle school. This is right in our grading. Here's a 7th grade math. Actually, it's a 7th grade math. And looks very traditional, right? So we've got some tests, we've got some scores on it, and so we know, okay, we're doing pretty well. Overall, our progress is an A. And I clicked on the Chapter 4 quiz, and this is what I got. Okay? That communicates to me that I did really well on it, but I have no idea what it is. I know that it's a math test, and I know that it was taken on February 12th. A little different example, this is actually from Kelly Parker's grade book, who has been doing some of this evidence-based grading for quite a while. And you can see on the left side there are different standards listed for algebra. And they were due at certain times, and this student in particular happens to be proficient in all of those places, and currently has an A for the quarter. But then I clicked on one. And not that this is what it would look like in every single case, but as Cody talked about the rubric, for this example, when I clicked on that to open it up, it showed me exactly not only what all of the different levels were, but even if we just looked at the left-hand column, we would know the different things on that assessment that were students were assessed on. Because on the left-hand side, it's all the different things within those standards and what that looks like on that given assessment. So just a very small example of how this is just a much more clear way to communicate learning to students, to you as parents at home, to those of us who work in schools and often have to look up things with students to see how they're doing, so that we can help them be the best that they can be.
So we talk a little bit about talk about like the behavior component, and at the middle we have some examples up here, but you have probably seen work habits at the middle school. If you're a middle schooler, you've seen work habits, great, which includes a variety of different things. And part of what evidence-based grading does is it takes out some of those habits, it takes out some of those things that we do and behaviors, and really focuses in on the learning, on what is showing learning. And if you have circled here, it often includes extra credit. That extra credit's not showing learning, it's showing that a person could do some extra things, right? Zeros can have a really huge imbalance. You'll see actually, you think at the high school, we have, 40 is the bottom for, kids' homework and things, because you can miss homework and completely outweigh what we talked about before, and the group scores. Grading is based on evidence of learning. Not what you're able to do, not because we all know that everyone has different things at home. Everyone has different opportunities at home. Some people have two parents at home at night. They can be there. They can be there to support them. They would have a tutor. We have another family where the kid goes home and they're the parent that night. Their parents work second shift. Maybe they're in a one-parent household. Not everybody has the same opportunities at home. And so we think of homework. Well, now we're grading homework when the playing field is not level. And so how can we take the learning we know we're doing at school, the evidence from school about what they're learning, and really have our grades reflect that piece of it? When I talked to a couple different universities about kind of their admissions component back to the high school, and I'm just speaking for the high school, we look at the ABCDF, will be on the transcript, and I said to the lacrosse admissions gentleman, the chancellor a few weeks ago, he goes, I would love to see ABCDF and actually the evidence-based grade on there too. Because you might have a kid with an A that's proficient and then have a kid with an A that's extending. And so they can actually see the difference of what those two things are. And so universities see value in it if it's done well and right. And we're looking at possibly partnering with them to kind of make that look like strong. But we want the grades to reflect what the students have learned, not necessarily what they will do. And what they do is what they learn, but extra tasks, right? We want to really show what they've learned in those processes. And so being able to pull out some of those work habits, pull out some of those employability skills even, and I think Paul's got some
Cody's stealing my thunder here a little bit. So
Oh,
I broke out the mid 80s here for you to sort of show the point of what Cody just talked about. So, a minute.
There it is. That's going to cut me. Right, please. Ready? Throw it. I did that. That's my fault. It's okay. The table broke the fall. There's something very important I forgot to tell you. What? Don't cross the street. Why? Would be bad. I'm fucking all good, Dad. What do you mean, Dad? Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light. It's called a platonic reversal, and that's bad. Okay. All right. Important safety tip. Thanks. All right. Ray. Take the left. Take the right.
Okay, that was the corny lead into work habits and separating out essentially don't cross over behaviors with academic learning, right? If you're tying those together and you're communicating in one way behaviors, so participation, collaboration, coming ready to learn to class, turning all of your things in on time, and you're lumping that in with all of the academic assessments and things that you have taken, you're not really clearly communicating what students have learned. So the idea is to take those things out and separate them and not cross them over. Those of you who have had someone go through the middle school, you have seen work habits before. These have been something that we put in place in 2018 in 7th grade and as sort of a pilot in 2019 across the whole middle school, which means, I believe that means all of our high schoolers, I think they maybe started as 8th graders. So everyone has seen this in some place or another. But it doesn't mean that they shouldn't get credit for it or have it be communicated, right? So it shouldn't be the same or lumped together, but all of those work habits that students show may very well impact their academic grade, right? If you practice really hard and you do a really good job in a lot of things, you don't get credit for that during a musical performance or an athletic event, but often those important things that you, time and effort that you put into it, does directly impact it. It just is communicated differently. So this is a screenshot from Infinite Campus, and you can see you've got a student who's in Math 3, and currently they're meeting expectations for the work habits expectations, all of the things that you see listed here in red, and they also have a very good academic grade as well. But they're two very different things. So the behaviors are completely pulled out of the academic grade. And the high school is looking at that just a little bit different.
Yeah, and so this is a draft, mind you, because we're still working on what this could look like. But one of the things that we're doing with our draft is also thinking about employability skills, really thinking about that post-secondary component. Because one of our parts of our mission is to make sure students are ready to live fulfilling lives. Well, so how do we take some of these work habits and work with employers, talk to employers in the community, and then take what they've kind of done from middle school to not totally change the language, but really make it connected to after high school, whether it's jobs, whether it's college, tech school, military. And so trying to take what students know and then make it more that focusing on that post-secondary work. So this is a draft. We got teachers working on this currently, but I wanted you to at least see it in draft form to see that we're still working on this at the work of the high school. And you have this, and Dr. Slater did a great job of connecting to it. And I really want to highlight a few things on this plan is prepared for a future, which is kind of what I would, in my brain, is a portrait of a graduate, right? This is where this word comes from, this portrait of a graduate. But especially the part about being a problem solver for desired outcomes. You now know your outcome. And you can problem solve, you can work with your team, you can think about how you can get there. This grading helps us achieve that. talks about being approachable, open to feedback. We talked about feedback before. This work is directly connected to our strategic plan, is directly connected to the conversations we've had with businesses, I think in our own practice, providing feedback and getting better, which we all do, which we've all talked about. Again, it goes right back into what we're doing as a district already around teacher clarity. It goes into what the district and the board have agreed to for our strategic plan. It fits very well and is married very well to those things. And if we can bring all those things together, we know we can help kids be successful. And so I just wanted to make sure that it's very much connected to that component.
Okay. On the left here, you can see sort of the timeline for some things in terms of what we're doing at various levels throughout the district in terms of elementary, middle, and high school. There will be some people who will be implementing this next year with a bit bigger rollout the following year. And also, we threw a lot of information at you. And Steve, if I could get your help. What we have here is just like a frequently asked questions document that hopefully answers, Sarah, can I get a little help with? That hopefully helps, just gives you something that you can go home with. And everything from what is evidence-based grading to what are the proficiency levels again, to what are work habits, why is this beneficial to students, how is this beneficial to teachers, how long have standards been around, any of those types of things that hopefully will capture a good portion of what did everybody get one? Do we have enough?
And my guess is we'll be adding a few things to this, because if you wrote anything down in your note cards, we see some trends, we want to make sure we get questions on here and then some answers too. So if you've got these questions, one, we'll bring it to our committee to get some answers, but also two, that we know other people have them.
I do think if you have a question, we can try to answer it. But like I said, our goal is to take that to our task force, and because there may be something that we just haven't considered as we've learned along the way. But otherwise, sure. Does anyone have any questions? Initial questions for myself, for Cody, for Sarah, Steve.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what schools are implementing it around us and what high schools are implementing it around us? Because I could be using it and there's not a ton.
Yeah, I can speak to the middle school side of it. I'm part of a middle school Badger principal group, which is the Dane and Greater Dane area. And the vast majority of them have been doing some version of this for years. Yeah. So this is not a new thing in our area by any means. Yeah.
At the high school level, McFarland started, actually when I taught there, probably, 8 years ago now. McFarland's been doing it. Actually, Madison East is doing it, right, piloting it this year. Sauk is moving to it. Monroe is doing it. In Badger Conference Principals, we also have a group of 16 of us, and I think there are 5 currently doing it and 4 to 5 moving to it. A lot of our work around PLCs comes from Stevenson High School, which is a very successful high school out of Illinois, probably one of the top in the country. They do it. So it's certainly something that's been going on for 15, 20 years, and as schools start to look at how they do instruction, it's coming on. So I know that I think Sauk is maybe next year full implementation. Again, it's similar to us, right? You kind of slowly roll it out, kind of see what's working, what we need to tweak. But McFarland, I know, has been doing it for upwards of 8 years. I don't remember how far ago it was I taught there. Yes, they started when I was there. Middleton does it in most of their areas in a little different context, but they've been doing it for a while, at least when I was there.
And what exactly it looks like in places can be different. You know, definitely some people use proficiency scales like what we have, proficiency levels. Some people use a 1, 2, 3, 4 system. There's lots of, again, the idea, the tight is that it's communicating student learning. The loose is what's best for you locally in terms of a district. Yeah.
I guess, I know you're saying that you're hoping to change kids, like how they look at learning, which is fine, but I got a middle school boy, and I can tell you right now,
what he can change, good or bad, that's not gonna help him. You know what I mean? So like, I'm trying to figure out how evidence-based grading versus percentage-based grading changes the kids that are not as interested. Like, there's a lot of kids that are just getting through school, right? They're learning, I'm gonna fight my way through it. And, you know, if I gotta retake a test 4 times because I'm not proficient, you know,
Yes.
you know, for example, myself, my family, we had a kid, he got 2 questions out of 20 wrong, and he wasn't proficient. And I'm like, move on. You know, it's like, go to the next lesson, you know, or, you know, I'm not sure how that'll change those kids.
Sure.
The kids are really interested in school, they're always gonna be interested in school and learning, you know, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple initial thoughts. Rubrics, or the thing that talks about that, those aren't new.
Right.
We have teachers who are using those already.
Right.
They're just generating a letter grade, if you will. So if you go into a language arts classroom and you need to write the perfect paragraph, you already have information like that. Engagement with middle school students, as someone who's worked with them for 20 plus years, we keep plugging away. Just saying, right? Yep. Yeah, so to sit down with middle schoolers and have a real engaging conversation about their learning, for sure there's going to be roadblocks with that and you know, the students who don't want to. But like I talked about at one point, we also don't want to let them off the hook because we know that, you know, 20 points and they only missed 2, they're doing really well. But those 2 might really impact something that comes down the road. And it's our job as adults to help them see that we still need to make sure that we win these. But yeah, the struggles real sometimes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Do you envision this as having the same sort of structure where you have a quarterly sort of grade, so you'll have like proficient quarter 1, does that carry over into quarters all year that this is going to cover? I mean, right now, you know, we have a
Quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. Yeah, I don't necessarily see that changing at our level, in part because in middle school students move, right? So they might have, in 7th and 8th grade, they might have tech ed first quarter, excuse me, 6th and 7th, they might have tech ed 1 quarter, and then their schedule is changing. So there needs to be a mark at some point that communicates sort of a final in how they did in one year, in one course, because we do move on.
At the high school next year, we're going to just terms or 2 semesters. And there'll be progress checks along the way, but the reason we're doing this, we don't have quarter classes. The high school's not built that way. We also understand that learning is a progression. Students learn at different rates. I might learn something, might take me a long time to figure something out. Paul picks up on it really quickly, and being able to cycle back through can take a while. And so a semester grade allows us to do that. We've already changed our calculation at the high school to be a rolling grade book between the 2 quarters, and honestly, it's been a bunch of like weird check boxes and trying to figure, and it's actually made it more complicated on the back end. By going to just 2 semesters, it kind of takes all that out. It gets rid of errors. It helps us with a variety of things. So at the high school, we're actually just going to 2 terms starting next year. I would argue we've already been doing that this year, but you just won't see a quarter grade. You'll see a progress grade at that quarter mark, which is
really reported to the universities anyways, the semester and the final grade.
Yeah. Universities' transcripts don't see quarter grades. They have no idea that maybe a kid struggled for a specific quarter. They only see that semester grade or that where they got that credit from. And so actually our practices, our grade book will actually, I would argue, actually meet the practice that we're already kind of doing for that.
Yeah.
Where would the criteria, where those statements, the criteria for proficiency come from? Would that be left up to the teachers? Is that across a standard that's going to be set across schools? Or, where is that?
Yeah, I mean, teachers would be setting those, but they would need to be consistent and common, so that in a 7th grade science class, they're the same for one teacher as they are for another, just like we have assessments right now, where they're all common, so that you're getting the same experience and learning the same material regardless of who you have as an instructor. And that's not new. Teachers are already doing that right now. If you were to talk with teachers about how they assess and when they're writing rubrics, there's a lot of that work already being done and has been done for a long time. Good question.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
So with this evidence-based grading and proficiency being the goal, will we see kids repeating, certain assignments and certain tests until they reach that proficiency level? So So they'll just keep repeating it?
The
until-
short answer is yes, and that is already done.
Okay, so.
Often. And sometimes there's criteria with that. So for example, if I don't do well on a test,
Yeah.
I may have some criteria that I need to meet in order to retake that or to make some corrections on it to show that I've learned it. But that's already being done in.
Because I always thought that was just an option, like if they wanted to boost their grade, they could retake the test, or they could redo the assignment. But with this goal being proficiency, that it's going to be required, which is fine. I was just kind of curious what the approach would be.
I mean, like right now,
Yeah.
I would say our current practice in most places, we're doing that in a lot of places. Like at the high school, we have staff, which is a time where students can come back in, redo an assessment, redo a project. But what's really nice about this is they're not doing the whole assessment. Let's say there's 4 sections, to Paul's point before, and they do really well in the 3. They're not retaking the full assessment on all those other, they've shown proficiency in those 3 pieces. Now we're just gonna focus on that one. So actually, I think going back to the question before about having the conversation, now we can really zoom in and have a conversation, and it changes the conversation. But yeah, retakes are something because we don't want to let them off the hook. We want them to be proficient. We want them to make sure they get it. Are there times where we have to move on? Yeah, there are times we have to move on, but we want to continue to like have conversation. That's why at the high school we have staff, right? We have these times where we can have these really structured conversations with students when they maybe aren't showing proficiency or they need that support. Whether you're just doing an IP, 504, or anywhere else, you can get that support with that.
I mean,
I don't have a question,
yeah,
sorry.
to your point about it being required.
Yeah.
I mean, I think right now it's required to the point in which we can require it. It's highly encouraged.
Yeah.
We are prompting students to come and do this. This is really important. You need to do this. But at the same time, they can't all be on, right? Like, we're not going to pick them up and sit them in a chair and say, you have to read it right. So I don't know that practice necessarily changes a whole lot from what we're doing in many cases.
And then I did have a second question too.
Yeah.
Right now, it's my understanding that when kids turn assignments in late, that they get full credit. And I think that's actually a disservice. That's not a reflection of how the real world works or going to college, how that works. So how is that going to play into the system? Are there any reprimands for late assignments? I don't know if there's going to be any change in that.
I would say that's a behavior. So that's reported out in those work habits or those employability skills because the purpose is to communicate what they've learned on that given standard or skill, not whether they learned it on October 1st compared to October 15th. However, to your point, it still needs to be communicated that students are not, in that case, they're not following our expectations in terms of being a responsible learner. Yeah. Yes.
You said for transcripts, report letter grades, I didn't understand how that gets flowed down in the system.
Sure. I'll
Yeah.
talk about transcripts.
Yeah, so transcripts, again, we report ABCDF, which we'll continue to do. We are still currently working on how we kind of, say, calculate, move from this evidence-based grade into that. There's a lot of different ways that it gets done. We're currently kind of looking at what works best for us and how we view it. We've had a lot of really good conversations as a group, as a committee, and even teachers getting feedback about like what that looks like. But there will still be that ABCDF piece of it. And going back to the transcript, the conversation I had from the Vice Chancellor of Admissions at La Crosse, he was like, I'd love to have both, because you might have a student who has A in proficient, A in extend, and actually provides a little bit of clarity. So we'll see what we can do with this. Still be ABCDF, it's that calculation over to it that we're still working on. And as we kind of get through and kind of come to a consensus on that, we'll be able to share that out. That's kind of still a work in progress for us, because every district does it a little bit differently in how they transfer that over. Yeah.
Is that letter grade going to be communicated to the student clearly as they go through each test and assessment so that they know when they want to go back to work to achieve proficiency in something when they let it slide?
Yeah, I mean, the proficiency level will absolutely be shared with them. I mean, that's that feedback
Do
component of
they
it.
understand the impact on their students?
Yeah, I mean, that's our job is to communicate, like, if they're showing proficiency, it's gonna end, it's gonna impact their grade.
But like along the way in that campus, I guess what I'm saying is if
Okay.
you're coming to the school, that they
Oh,
kind of
gotcha.
each thing they're doing is impacting it, there's no surprises in the semester.
Let me give you an example. In 8th grade, we currently do this. So Kelly does this in 8th grade. And students know ahead of time, in order to receive an A, every single thing that is assessed, correct me if I'm wrong, needs to be proficient or extend. So as they're moving through the fourth quarter right now, let's say they've had a couple of assessments. If they have a proficient and an approaching, they already know that will not give them an A unless they do something with that standard that's approaching. Is that, could you communicate that more clearly?
Correct. I think to clarify what you're asking is there going to be an in-progress letter grade that they can monitor throughout the quarter? We're working
To see if the system will do that,
Yes.
but they do know what the proficiencies and the extents and all of those, how they work together in order to get them.
Give me your example of a proficient students.
Sure.
Students are going to have
Correct.
where they stand and
Yep.
it's supported. And where
Absolutely.
students have great vision where they stand.
Absolutely. Yep. Great question. Yeah.
They're not granular in the system.
Is there what?
They're not granular in that system. Like EWMS down to the top 5, you know, rankings. They're not granular in that system. You're both ranked.
Just, sure. I mean, because the overall grade is still what?
Yeah, it won't change anything with what the end product ends up being. In our case, 5% ends up being 9 kids in our school. So our top 7 or 8. We don't even have a class rank currently. We've got rid of class rank before I got here. So class rank with the law day system kind of went away. Now we're trying to figure out how to like get 5-10%. That's internally our work, and actually most high schools across the state trying to figure out, because this legislation came from the legislature. We're still trying to figure out how to navigate that piece of it. But there's still going to be a grade that comes out the end. There's still going to be a GPA. There's still going to be, for a variety of reasons, and I would argue because of this, because of scholarships, there's a variety of different things that those things still have to be in place. And so in the end, a transcript is still going to look the same. There will be nothing different in the transcript except for, unless you're in the top 5 or 10%, there might be delineation somewhere on there, which we don't even know what that's going to look like, because we're still working with Infinite Campus for them to be able to do it, because even they don't know how they're going to do it on transcripts across the state that all have Infinite Campus. And so we're still working on the back end for that one. Yeah.
So in the interest of time, I think let's take 3 more questions, and then don't hesitate to leave them. We will compile those and do our best to answer them, because we want to make sure not only you get the answers to these questions, but also all of the people who aren't here be able to hear this as well. So,
I have a
Yeah.
follow-up question to GPA. So everything's an A, a B, or a C? Because it sounds like with the, you know, C's or proficient, like there's no more like E pluses or E minuses. Like
We haven't quite kind of come to that conclusion quite yet. So when I say we're still trying to figure out that conversion, we're still in the conversations. We're still having that, I don't say debate, but we're diving into a lot of what other schools are doing, but also just kind of reading on what's best practice for that. Yeah. There's not a clear answer for that yet, but as we work through it.
I know like an A minus
Yep.
sometimes is like a huge difference.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
good question. Yeah.
On the transcripts that are sent to colleges and admission officers, is there any indication that this is an evidence-based school versus a letter-based school?
So universities, we have a school profile that universities look at, and so they are able to tell, okay, this school is evidence-based grading, this school is traditional. And I said I've reached out to a few of them recently because I wanted to better understand how they view these things, and their comment was not really any different because it's everywhere. They said there are some schools that transcripts communicate both, and that can be helpful if it's done clear and well. Otherwise, it's not that helpful. But for universities, they said there's so many schools that do it now across the state. But it's part of like their school profile when they look at schools. Like, let's decide, because to the point before, a 4.0 here might be different than a 4.0 somewhere else. Stone High School had 28 4.0s last, at the kids graduating class. They must not have a 4.0 killer or some rigor in there, right? And so 4.0s look different in different places. And so schools look at the whole profile of what schools offer, what kind of AP courses they offer, what dual credit. I mean, they look at a whole variety of things when they look at schools, aside from just kind of that transcript. So when they see them on more of application or a transcript, they kind of know what they're getting into.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, so about 10 teachers will be starting this next school year, which doesn't seem like a whole lot. I'm just curious, is the goal that next year everyone's doing it, or are you just adding, if that's the case, or is it the goal final day or do you have one?
I think the goal is 25, 26. I also think we know that this is a big process, and we've learned a lot again, please, if you have questions, leave those on those cards. We really appreciate you giving us an hour of your time tonight and coming out. It's been helpful for us and hopefully helpful for you too. If you have a specific question that you want addressed right now, we're here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.